They were standing only moments away from making a decision that could have closed the door on your love story forever. The room was prepared, the family was watching, the promises were ready, and everyone believed your soulmate had finally accepted a future without you. But just before everything became official, one unexpected question cut through the ceremony, and the moment your name entered the conversation, your soulmate's entire expression changed. What happened after that question was something nobody in that room had prepared themselves to witness. Listen carefully, because this was not simply nervousness before a wedding. Your soulmate had spent a long time convincing themselves that marrying someone else was the responsible thing to do. They had tried to bury the memories, silence the emotions, and accept the idea that some love stories are meant to remain unfinished. Their family had encouraged them to move forward. People around them kept saying that enough time had passed, that the past should stay in the past, and that happiness could still be built with someone new. Eventually, your soulmate stopped arguing. They agreed to the ceremony. But agreeing with their mouth never meant their heart had completely agreed. On the day everything was supposed to become final, your soulmate walked into that room carrying a secret weight nobody could see. They smiled when people looked at them. They answered questions politely. They stood beside the person everyone expected them to marry. Yet inside, something felt terribly wrong. It was not hatred toward the person beside them. It was not fear of commitment. It was the painful awareness that somewhere beneath all those promises was another promise they had never truly forgotten, the promise their heart once made to you. The ceremony continued, and for a while everything appeared normal. Words were spoken. Families exchanged emotional looks. Someone even whispered that your soulmate finally seemed ready to begin a new chapter. But then an older person in the room, someone who knew more about your soulmate's history than most people realized, asked a question that instantly changed the atmosphere. They looked directly at your soulmate and asked, "Before you promise your entire future to someone else, are you absolutely certain there is nobody from your past whose name would still make you question this decision?" The room became silent. Your soulmate did not answer. At first, people assumed they were simply emotional. Someone tried to laugh softly and move the ceremony forward. But the person asking the question refused to let the moment disappear. They asked again, more quietly this time, if the person you once loved walked through that door right now and asked you whether this is truly what you want. Could you look them in the eyes and say yes? And that was when something inside your soulmate broke. Don't skip this part, because their reaction told the truth before their mouth ever could. Their hands began trembling. Their eyes dropped toward the floor. The person standing beside them immediately noticed the change. Family members exchanged nervous looks. Someone whispered your soulmate's name, trying to bring them back into the moment, but mentally they were no longer standing inside that ceremony. They were remembering you. They remembered a conversation nobody else knew about. They remembered the last time you looked at them with disappointment in your eyes. They remembered words they wished they could take back. They remembered how quickly everything between you had collapsed after other people became involved. And most painfully, they remembered that there had never been one clear moment when they stopped loving you. There had only been distance, pride, confusion, pressure, and silence. The person beside your soulmate finally asked the question everyone was afraid to ask. Who are you thinking about? Your soulmate tried to speak, but no words came out. Then someone from the family whispered, "Is this about them?" Your name did not even need to be fully spoken. Your soulmate closed their eyes. That single reaction changed everything. Suddenly, the ceremony was no longer about two people beginning a future together. It became about a truth that had been avoided for far too long. The person your soulmate was supposed to marry stepped away slightly and asked, "Have I been standing beside someone whose heart still belongs somewhere else?" Your soulmate immediately said they never wanted to hurt anyone. They said they had genuinely tried to move forward. They admitted they had believed marrying someone else might finally silence what they felt for you. But then they said something that stunned everyone. "I thought choosing a different future would make the old one disappear." It didn't. Nobody interrupted. Your soulmate continued, their voice shaking now. They admitted that whenever something meaningful happened in their life, you were still the first person they imagined telling. Whenever they thought about getting older, some version of you still appeared in that picture. Whenever someone asked them what love had changed them the most, they could never answer honestly because the real answer had always been you. The person conducting the ceremony quietly closed the document in front of them. Someone in the family became angry and demanded that the ceremony continue. They said too much money had been spent, too many people had arrived, too many arrangements had already been made. But your soulmate looked at them and finally said, "That is exactly the problem. Everyone keeps talking about what has already been arranged. Nobody is asking whether my heart agreed to any of it." That statement changed the entire room. For the first time in a long time, your soulmate was no longer trying to please everyone else. They were no longer protecting appearances. They were no longer pretending that losing you had become easy simply because enough time had passed. Then came the question that pushed everything beyond the point of return. Someone asked, "If you could speak to them right now, what would you say?" Your soulmate looked completely overwhelmed. For several seconds, they said nothing. Then quietly, they answered, "I would ask whether I destroyed the one love I was actually supposed to fight for." The room went completely still. Don't skip what happened next, because this is where the ceremony truly began falling apart. The person your soulmate was supposed to marry removed their hand from theirs and said, "Then you need to answer that question before you make a promise to me." Nobody expected that response. Your soulmate looked shocked. Instead of creating a scene, that person simply said, "I deserve someone who can choose me without wondering about someone else. And you deserve to know why hearing one name can still change everything inside you." Those words hit your soulmate harder than any accusation could have. The ceremony was paused. Family members began arguing. Some demanded that your soulmate forget you once and for all. Others remained silent because they had known for years that your story had never truly ended. One relative finally admitted, we kept telling them they were over you because we wanted them to be over you. That doesn't mean they actually were. And then another secret surfaced. Someone in that room knew your soulmate had tried to reach you before. Not once. More than once. Messages had been written and deleted. A letter had been kept but never sent. Your name had been searched late at night. Questions about your life had quietly been asked through mutual connections. Your soulmate had spent years pretending they had moved on while secretly wondering whether you still remembered them the same way. When this was revealed, your soulmate looked toward the person who exposed it and asked, "Why would you say that here?" The answer was immediate. Because you are seconds away from making a permanent decision based on a lie. That sentence shattered the final wall. Your soulmate stepped away from the ceremony completely. They looked around the room and said, "I cannot promise forever to someone while another person still owns the question I have never answered." Someone asked, "And what question is that?" Your soulmate took a long breath. Then they said, "What if our love story ended because we stopped fighting at the exact moment we should have fought harder?" And now the ceremony was no longer waiting for vows. It was waiting for your soulmate to make the biggest decision of their life. Because moments later, they reached for their phone. They opened something they had kept hidden for a very long time. Something connected directly to you. And when the people closest to them saw what was still saved there, even the relatives who had been demanding that the ceremony continue suddenly stopped talking. Because what your soulmate had kept all these years proved one thing nobody could deny anymore. They had never completely let you go. What they saw on your soulmate's phone was not a recent message, not a casual photograph, and not something that could be dismissed as simple nostalgia. It was a voice recording connected to you, one your soulmate had kept hidden for years. A recording they had listened to during some of the loneliest moments of their life. The second it appeared on the screen, your soulmate tried to lock the phone, but it was already too late. Someone standing nearby had seen your name. And suddenly, everyone understood why one question about you had been powerful enough to stop an entire ceremony. Your soulmate stood frozen, almost embarrassed that something so private had been exposed. They had built an image of being completely healed. They had convinced friends and family that your chapter had been closed. They had even convinced themselves, at least during the daytime. But every time life became quiet, every time loneliness became too heavy, every time they questioned whether they had chosen the wrong path, they returned to that recording. Someone finally asked, "How long have you been keeping this?" Your soulmate looked down and whispered, "Since the day everything ended." That answer changed the energy in the room again. Because this was not something they had saved accidentally. It had survived new phones, new years, new relationships, new promises, and every attempt to create a future without you. Your soulmate had deliberately carried one piece of you into every chapter that came afterward. The person they had been preparing to marry looked at them with painful clarity and said, "You were never waiting to forget them. You were waiting for some reason to believe they might still come back." Your soulmate did not deny it. And that silence hurt more than an argument ever could. One family member became furious. They stepped forward and demanded that the recording be deleted immediately. They said the past had already caused enough damage. They insisted that you were no longer part of your soulmate's life and had no place inside that ceremony. But something had changed. For years, your soulmate would have remained silent. This time, they looked directly at that family member and said, "You don't get to decide what this meant to me anymore." The room went quiet. Your soulmate continued, and every word sounded like something they had wanted to say for years. "You told me walking away was the mature thing to do. You told me silence would make everything easier. You told me if they truly loved me, they would find their way back. And when they didn't, you told me that proved you were right. But you never told me what was happening on the other side. You never told me what they were being told about me." That last sentence made one person in the room visibly uncomfortable. Your soulmate noticed. So did everyone else. There was suddenly a different kind of silence, a dangerous silence, the kind that appears when somebody realizes an old secret is about to surface. Your soulmate slowly turned toward that person. "What did you tell them?" The person immediately shook their head, "Nothing." Your soulmate stepped closer. "What did you tell them about me?" Again, denial. But someone else interrupted. "Tell the truth." Everyone turned. An older relative who had remained silent throughout the ceremony was now standing near the back of the room with tears in their eyes. They said, "This wedding should never continue until they know what really happened." Your soulmate's face changed. "What really happened?" The older relative hesitated, then admitted that after your relationship collapsed, certain family members had made sure neither of you received the full truth. Messages were intercepted. Conversations were twisted. Silence was deliberately encouraged on both sides. You were allowed to believe your soulmate had chosen life without you, while your soulmate was encouraged to believe you had stopped caring. Your soulmate looked physically shaken. For years, they had carried the belief that you simply let them go. Now they were hearing that you may have been carrying the exact same wound. "Are you saying they tried to reach me?" Nobody answered immediately. Your soulmate raised their voice. "Did they try to reach me?" Finally, the older relative nodded. "Yes." One word. That was all it took. Your soulmate sat down as if their legs could no longer support them. Their eyes filled instantly. "How many times?" The answer came slowly. "More than you were ever told." Your soulmate covered their mouth. The person they were supposed to marry stepped farther away, understanding that this ceremony was finished long before anyone officially announced it. Your soulmate began asking questions rapidly now. When? What did they say? Who stopped it? Why didn't anybody tell me? Nobody wanted to answer the final question. Because the truth was uglier than your soulmate expected. The people involved had believed they were protecting them. They believed your relationship with you was too complicated, too emotional, too uncertain. They wanted something safer for your soulmate. Something easier to explain. Someone the family could accept without reopening old wounds. So they helped create distance. Then they allowed time to make that distance look natural. Your soulmate stood up again, but this time there was anger underneath the heartbreak. You let me believe they abandoned me. Nobody spoke. You watched me blame them. Still silence. You watched me try to hate someone who may have been trying to come back. One relative attempted to justify the decision. We thought eventually you would thank us. Your soulmate laughed once, but there was no happiness in it. Thank you for what? For stealing years from both of us? That sentence destroyed whatever control remained in the room. Some people started crying. Others became defensive. But your soulmate no longer cared about keeping anyone comfortable. They unlocked their phone again. They opened the old recording. And this time, they pressed play. Your voice filled the room. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough for your soulmate to close their eyes. Enough for everyone else to understand that this was not some forgotten romance your soulmate had exaggerated in their mind. There had been real love there. Deep love. The kind that leaves a mark long after two people stop speaking. When the recording ended, nobody knew what to say. Then your soulmate whispered, "I listened to that every year on the day we lost each other." The person they had almost married looked devastated, but surprisingly calm. They asked, "What happens now?" Your soulmate stared at the phone. For the first time all day, their answer came without hesitation. "I need the truth." Someone asked, "From whom?" Your soulmate looked up. "From them." Your name did not have to be spoken. Everybody knew. Your soulmate walked away from the ceremony, still wearing everything they had put on to begin a future with someone else. But now they were no longer thinking about that future. They were searching for you. They opened an old contact. Their finger hovered over your name. Years of anger, regret, pride, and unanswered questions stood between that finger and one simple touch. They almost backed out. Then they remembered what had just been revealed. They remembered that you may never have abandoned them at all. And finally, they pressed the button. But before the call could fully connect, one person rushed across the room and grabbed your soulmate's arm. "Don't call them yet." Your soulmate pulled away angrily. "Why?" The person looked terrified. Because there was still one final secret nobody had revealed. A secret about the last message you tried to send. A message your soulmate had never seen. And when they finally learned what that message said, the canceled ceremony was going to become the smallest shock of the entire day. The person who stopped the call looked at your soulmate with fear in their eyes and finally admitted that the last message you sent had never reached them. Your soulmate froze. What message? Nobody answered at first. Then the truth came out. Years ago, when everyone believed you had accepted the end of the relationship, you had actually made one final attempt to save it. You had written that you were willing to forget the arguments, forget the pride, and forget everything that had been said in anger. You only wanted one honest conversation. But someone close to your soulmate saw that message first. And they deleted it. Your soulmate stared at them as if the entire room had disappeared. You deleted their message. The person lowered their eyes. They admitted they believed allowing you back into your soulmate's life would destroy the future the family had already planned. So they made the decision for both of you. And for years, your soulmate believed your silence meant you had stopped loving them. While you may have believed their silence meant exactly the same thing. That realization broke something inside your soulmate. They turned away from everyone and whispered, "We lost years because somebody decided our love wasn't worth one conversation." No one could defend what had happened anymore. The person your soulmate had almost married quietly removed the symbol of the ceremony and placed it on the table. Then they said, "Go find the answer you should have received years ago." Your soulmate looked at them with tears in their eyes. There was no anger between them now. Only the painful understanding that marrying someone while loving another person would have created another broken story. Your soulmate picked up their phone again. This time nobody tried to stop them. Their hands were shaking as they searched for your name. And suddenly, all the fear returned. What if you had moved on? What if too much time had passed? What if the pain had changed you? What if you answered and wanted nothing to do with them? But then your soulmate whispered something that silenced every person standing nearby. "I already lost them once because I was afraid. I will not lose them again without knowing the truth." And they called. One ring. Then another. Every second felt longer than the years you had been apart. Your soulmate almost ended the call. But then something happened on the other side. The call connected. Your soulmate stopped breathing for a moment. They had imagined this moment hundreds of times, but now that it was real, every speech they had prepared disappeared. Finally, with tears running down their face, they said only one thing. "I just found out you tried to come back." Silence followed. Then your soulmate whispered, "Please tell me I'm not too late." The entire ceremony had now been forgotten. The decorations no longer mattered. The promises prepared for someone else no longer mattered. The opinions of the family no longer mattered. Because one question about you had uncovered years of hidden truth. One question forced your soulmate to admit that moving forward was never the same as moving on. And one question saved them from making a lifelong promise while their heart was still waiting for an unfinished love. Whatever happens next will require courage from both sides. There are wounds that cannot disappear in one conversation. There are years that cannot simply be returned. But there is also a truth that can no longer be hidden. Your soulmate never completely stopped loving you. They only stopped believing they still had the right to. And now, after everything that happened inside that ceremony, they finally understand something they should have understood years ago. Real love should never be abandoned because other people are uncomfortable with it. It should never be surrendered because pride makes silence easier. And it should never be replaced simply because waiting became painful. Your soulmate was ready to marry someone else that day. But they walked away carrying only one question in their heart. If you still feel even a piece of what we once had, can we finally finish the conversation that should never have been taken away from us?